Angelica burst out of the woods. She was covered in dirt, brambles, and scrapes. As soon as her feet hit the gravel road, she looked in both directions. There it was, the carriage, only 20 feet away. She was going to make it in time. She dropped her dress and shook it out, trying to get rid of all the dirt. Then, still holding the briefcase, she approached the carriage. Harold, the coachman, tipped his hat to her. "Good evening, Miss Blackmoor," he said. Angelica handed him the briefcase. "Good evening, Harold." She tried not to wince. Harold had a bulbous nose and horrific breath, and that was on a good day. Tonight he reeked of ale and onions. "You're bleeding, Miss Blackmoor," he said. "Harold, all of us bleed if we're hit hard enough." "And you're missing an earring." "Yes, Harold, it's been that kind of night. Excuse me." She stepped into the carriage and relaxed against the seat. As Harold pulled the carriage away down the road, she tried to get some sleep. Unfortunately, screams of terrified passengers still haunted her dreams. Harold opened the door, only a few blocks away from Waterloo Station. Angelica stepped out. Ah, London! The smell of fresh-baked bread mingled with that of fish and body odor and manure. It was ghastly, actually. Angelica hated big cities. She looked around, trying to find her contact, Alistair. She had only 20 minutes until she needed to complete the final part of her mission. After a few minutes of searching, Angelica finally found her contact. His name was Alistair. He was a tall, lanky man with a handlebar mustache, and today he was wearing a top hat and an overcoat. He almost looked respectable. Almost. He also had hair poking out from underneath his hat, and a lot of stubble on his chin. Angelica handed him the briefcase. "The combination is 563, she said. Alistair gave her a funny look. "How'd you conjure that up?" he asked. "I have my ways, Alistair." He looked at the briefcase. "So what's in this thing that's worth risking your life over?" Angelica looked at him. "Alistair, let's get one thing straight. I never risk my life." The contents of that briefcase contained Professor Frederick Guthrie's notes on his experiments combining ethylene and sulfur dichloride. Alistair gave her a confused look. What happens when you combine them?" he asked. "Something horrible," said Angelica. "Now, you're going to take this briefcase to Waterloo Station. There you will meet a man. His name is Fritz Haber. He'll be wearing a red rose in his lapel." "Fritz Haber? Is he German?" asked Alistair. "Yes, Alistair, he is quite German," said Angelica. "Herr Haber will be boarding a train to Heidelberg in 20 minutes, and he's expecting you. Off you go!" Angelica followed Alistair through the city streets a safe distance away. She was ultimately responsible for the success of the mission. She would see it through until the end. As she watched Alistair, the screams of people on the Phoenix echoed in her head. She knew the contents of the briefcase Alistair held in his hands would cause even more screams and more terror. She pushed the thought out of her mind. Complete the mission, she told herself. Her organization rarely tolerated mistakes. She followed Alistair into Waterloo Station. There she watched him hand the briefcase to a man wearing a red rose in his lapel. Angelica exhaled with relief. Her mission was a success. It was complete. She would have breakfast in celebration, and maybe even buy herself some new earrings. It was nearly 11 o'clock when Angelica left the jewelry store. She headed for the carriage, but then she stopped. She saw a man with a bowler hat, an overcoat, and incredibly broad shoulders walking toward her. It was Professor Burke, and his eyes and his pace indicated severe determination. Angelica burst out of the woods. Her shoe dragging brambles and scrapes. The moment her dress shook it out, trying to get as much dirt as she could out of the dress. And I said out too many times. He handed him the briefcase. Harold has bad breath. I forgot to talk about it. Here you go, let's get going. That's the stupidest line, it's not in there. I just made it up. What? As Harold pulled the horses away and they started driving, and that's the stupidest way to say it, she relaxed. Harold opened the door to the carriage, only flew blocks away. Flew, because that's a real word. Right. Harold opened the door, only a few. Really? I can't say this? We're going to try it again. Angelica stepped out. She looked around to see if she could find her contact named Harold. Alistair. After a few minutes of searching, Angelica finally found Alistair. He was somebody awesome, but we're going to skip over that and start over. He had a tall hat on, and it should be called a top hat. Yeah. On. And he was also wearing a black trench coat. And the trench coat wasn't really available during that time period. We got to start over. Alistair looked at her, and he did something, and I can't remember, and I'm really tired, but I'm going to go on because I need the practice.
How'd you conjure that up?
He asked. How come I can't remember after that? It's on Professor Guthrie's experiments with combining ethylene with sodium dichloride. I hope that's the right thing. It might not be. I might not even be pronouncing it right, but whatever. Angelica followed Alistair a few distances. Wow. The mission was hers to complete. I don't know why I keep saying that. Complete. She was ultimately responsible for his success. Really? Well, I've been told by the producers that we're going to be needing some horse sound effects for the carriage, so here's what I got for you.